Marry a man with holes in his boots? Over my dead body. Those were the words Thomas Whitfield shouted across the ranch yard, loud enough for every hand, every neighbor, and every gossiping soul in Silver Hollow to hear. Dust rose around his daughter's feet as she stood her ground, chin high, hands wrapped tight around an old leather satchel. Behind her, Wade Calhoun stood quiet. His shirt was faded from years of sun. His boots were patched twice over. His gun belt hung heavy on his hips, a reminder of a past nobody in town cared to understand. Every man leaning against that fence expected him to look away, to back down, to remember his place. He didn't. Clara Whitfield, the richest rancher's only daughter, had just turned down marriage to the wealthiest banker in the territory. In front of the whole town, she chose the broken cowboy instead. Nobody understood why. Not her father. Not the sheriff. Not even the women who had once called her their dearest friend. But Clara knew something the rest of Silver Hollow did not. She knew Wade Calhoun was innocent of everything they whispered about him. And she was about to risk her family, her fortune, and her future to prove it. This is her story. If you love a slow burn Western romance filled with secrets, betrayal, and a love strong enough to survive a whole town's judgment, stay with us to the very end. And subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. Silver Hollow sat in a green valley between two ridges, fed by a creek that never seemed to run dry. Cattle grazed on land owned mostly by one man, Thomas Whitfield, and money in town moved mostly through one bank, owned by Elias Grant. It was a Sunday in July when Elias rode up to the Whitfield ranch in his best coat, a small velvet box tucked in his breast pocket. He had rehearsed his proposal for a week. He knew the exact words that would make Thomas Whitfield proud and the exact tone that would make Clara feel she had no room to refuse. He found her by the corral, sleeves rolled up, helping a hand calm a nervous mare. Her braid had come loose at the edges. There was dirt on her hands. Elias wrinkled his nose slightly before he caught himself and smiled. "Miss Whitfield," he said, removing his hat. "I wonder if I might have a word." Clara wiped her hands on her apron and nodded, though something in her stomach already sank. She had seen this coming for months. Every dinner her father hosted, every dance at the town social, Elias Grant found a reason to stand close to her, to speak of futures and partnerships as if she were a piece of land waiting to be surveyed. He got down on one knee in front of the whole yard. Ranch hands stopped their work. Her father came out onto the porch, arms crossed, already smiling like the answer was settled. "Clara Whitfield," Elias said, loud enough for everyone, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The yard went quiet. Even the horses seemed to hold still. Clara looked at the box in his hand, then at her father's hopeful face, then past them both toward the tree line, where a lone rider was leading two horses back from the ridge. Wade Calhoun. He had been hired only weeks ago to break in new stock, and already half the valley whispered about him, a drifter, a man who kept to himself, a man some claimed had killed before. 3. She didn't know why her eyes went to him at that moment. Maybe because he was the only person in that yard not watching her, not waiting for her answer, simply doing his work as if the whole scene had nothing to do with him. "Elias," she said carefully, "I'm honored. But I need time." It was not a no. It was not a yes. But for a woman expected to say yes the second she was asked, it landed like a slap. Her father's smile faded. Elias stood, brushed off his knee, and forced his own smile back into place. "Of course," he said, though his voice had gone cold. "Take all the time you need, Clara. I am a patient man. That night, alone in her room, Clara opened the satchel she carried everywhere and took out her mother's old journal, the leather worn soft from years of handling. Her mother had died when Clara was 12, but her words still lived on these pages, and one line, written in faded ink, had guided Clara through every hard decision since. A woman who marries for safety alone will spend her whole life guarding a cage she built herself. Clara closed the journal and looked out her window toward the bunkhouse, where a single lamp still burned. She told herself she was only curious about the new hand everyone talked about. She told herself that twice more before she finally fell asleep. She did not yet know that the man in that bunkhouse carried a secret that would either save her family or destroy it completely. 4. Chapter 2: The Man They Misjudged. Wade Calhoun had learned long ago that a quiet man draws less trouble than a loud one, even when trouble finds him anyway. He kept his answers short in town. He paid for his supplies in exact coin and never lingered at the saloon long enough to be pulled into a card game or a fight. Still, rumors clung to him like burrs on a wool coat. Someone said he'd shot a man in Abilene. Someone else swore he'd ridden with outlaws in the nations before landing in Silver Hollow with nothing but a horse, a rifle, and a past he refused to discuss. The truth was simpler and heavier than any rumor. 2 years earlier, in a small Texas town, Wade's mother had died of a fever the family couldn't afford medicine for. His younger sister May was only 11, and their father had already been gone a decade, killed in a range dispute that left the family with nothing but debt. Wade sold the last of the family's land to a man who cheated him on the price, knowing a grieving young man with a sick sister had no room to bargain. He used what little money remained to place May with their aunt in Kansas, promising to send money every season until he could bring her somewhere permanent. He had been drifting and working ever since, saving every coin, sending most of it away, keeping barely enough to eat. Silver Hollow was supposed to be one more stop, one more season of work before moving on to wherever the next job paid better. He did not plan on Clara Whitfield. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. A green colt spooked during a training session and threw its rider hard against the fence rail. Clara had been walking past with a basket of mending and dropped everything to run to the boy's side. Wade reached the colt first, calming it with a low voice and a steady hand before it could trample anyone else. Then he knelt beside Clara, helping her check the young hand's arm for a break. "You know horses," Clara said, more a statement than a question. 5. "Better than I know people," Wade answered, and for the first time since he'd arrived in Silver Hollow, he almost smiled. That single afternoon started something neither of them planned to admit. Over the following weeks, small moments built on each other. Clara would bring water to the corral and stay a few minutes longer than necessary. Wade would notice when she was troubled and find some reason to be nearby without ever pushing her to talk about it. Neither spoke of anything beyond horses and weather, yet both of them began to look forward to those quiet minutes more than either wanted to admit. One evening, after most of the hands had gone in for supper, Clara found Wade repairing a section of fence alone. "Everyone in town has a story about you," she said, leaning against a post. "None of them agree with each other." Wade kept working, not looking up. "People need somebody to talk about. Might as well be the stranger who doesn't argue back. Is any of it true?" He paused then, hammer resting against the rail. "I've done things I'm not proud of, to survive. I've never hurt anybody who didn't come looking for a fight first." He finally met her eyes. "That's the truth, Miss Whitfield. Whether the town believes it is their business, not mine." Something about his steadiness, the way he offered honesty without asking for pity, settled into Clara's chest and stayed there. She had grown up surrounded by men who performed kindness. For an audience, Elias Grant chief among them. Wade Calhoun performed nothing. He simply was who he was, in front of her or alone in a field, and that consistency felt more valuable to Clara than every soft word Elias had ever spoken. She did not tell her father about these conversations. She did not tell anyone. But she began writing about them in a journal of her own, tucked beside her mother's, and the pages filled faster than she expected. 6. 7. Chapter 3 Whispers and Warnings. News in Silver Hollow traveled faster than the weather. By the time the church bell rang the following Sunday, half the congregation already knew that Clara Whitfield had turned down Elias Grant's proposal, at least for the moment, and more than a few eyes had noticed how often she found reasons to be near the new ranch hand. Mrs. Pruitt, the Reverend's wife, cornered Clara after service. "Dear, a woman in your position has responsibilities. Your father built this town's future on that ranch. You cannot throw it away, chasing after a stranger nobody trusts." Clara kept her voice even. "I haven't thrown anything away, Mrs. Pruitt. I simply haven't said yes to something I don't feel yet." Feelings, the older woman said, as if the word tasted bitter, are a luxury for women who don't need to think about their family's survival. Clara walked away before she said something she would regret, but the conversation followed her home like a shadow. That evening, her father called her into his study, a room she rarely entered unless summoned for something serious. Thomas Whitfield sat behind his desk, a glass of whiskey untouched beside a stack of papers. He looked older than she remembered, lines deepening around his eyes. "Sit down, Clara." She Saturday. "I built this ranch from nothing," he said. "Your mother and I broke this land together, acre by acre, when everyone said it couldn't be done. I promised her, before she passed, that I would see you settled and safe. Elias Grant can give you that. Elias Grant wants land, Papa, not me." Her father's jaw tightened. "Every marriage is a partnership of some kind, Clara. Love is a fine thing to hope for, but it doesn't pay debts or keep a roof standing in a hard winter." 8. Something in the way he said debts made Clara pause. "What debts?" Her father's eyes flicked toward the papers on his desk, then away. "Nothing you need to worry about. Just an old man's business." She did not believe him, but she knew pressing further that night would gain nothing. She rose, kissed her father's cheek despite the tension between them, and left the study with a new weight settling over her. Later, unable to sleep, she crept back down the stairs and found the study door unlocked. On her father's desk, half hidden beneath a ledger, was a letter from Silver Hollow Trust Bank. She recognized Elias Grant's precise handwriting immediately. The letter mentioned a loan taken against the ranch 2 winters prior, after a drought nearly wiped out the herd, and a balance still owed that, if unpaid by the following spring, would allow the bank to claim a portion of Whitfield land as settlement. Clara sat down slowly in her father's chair, the letter trembling slightly in her hands. Her father was not simply hoping she would marry Elias Grant for love or convenience. He needed her to marry him, or risk losing the ranch her mother had helped build. For the first time, she understood the full weight resting on her shoulders. And for the first time, she also understood why Wade Calhoun's honesty felt like the only solid ground left beneath her feet. She folded the letter, placed it back exactly as she'd found it, and walked out into the cool night air. She did not go back to bed. Instead, she walked toward the bunkhouse, and for the first time, she knocked. 9. Chapter 4 The night everything changed. Wade answered the door with his gun already in hand out of habit, then lowered it the moment he saw who stood outside. "Miss Whitfield. It's near midnight. I know. Clara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. I needed air, and my feet carried me here before my mind caught up. He studied her face in the lantern light and saw something troubled behind her eyes. Without a word, he stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind him so as not to wake the other hands, and walked with her toward the fence line where the horses stood dozing under the stars. You want to tell me what's wrong, he said, not quite a question, or you want me to guess? Clara let out a breath. My father is in debt to Elias Grant. If it isn't paid by spring, the bank takes part of our land. Wade's jaw tightened, though his voice stayed calm. And Grant proposed marriage right around the same time he's holding that debt over your father's head. Yes. That's not a proposal, Clara. That's a business deal wearing a ring. Hearing him say her first name, plain and unguarded, did something to her chest she wasn't prepared for. She looked up at him. Everyone tells me I'm foolish for hesitating. That I should be grateful that a man like Elias wants me at all. You're not foolish. Wade's voice roughened. You're the only person in this whole valley who seems to understand that a life bought and paid for isn't the same as a life lived free. They stood close enough that Clara could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he held himself back, as if one wrong move might shatter something neither of them was ready to name. Wade, she said softly, why did you really come to Silver Hollow? 10. He looked away toward the dark ridge line, and for a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, he told her about his mother's death, about May waiting in Kansas, about every dollar he saved and sent away instead of spending on himself. He told her about the man who cheated his family out of their land, and how he had sworn never to let another soul push him around the way that man had. I'm not the outlaw this town wants me to be, he finished. I'm just a man trying to save enough to give my sister a real home. That's all I've ever wanted since I was 17 years old. Clara felt tears gather that she refused to let fall. That's not a small thing, Wade. That's the biggest thing I've ever heard. Neither of them moved for a long moment. Then Wade reached up, hesitant, and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his rough fingers gentle against her skin. I have no right to feel what I feel for you, he murmured. I've got nothing to offer a woman like you. No land, no name worth anything in this town, nothing but debts of my own. You have honesty, Clara whispered. You have more of that than every wealthy man who's ever asked for my hand. When he leaned down and kissed her, it was slow and careful, as if he expected the moment to be taken from him at any second. Clara kissed him back without hesitation, her hands finding the front of his shirt, holding on as though the ground beneath them might shift. When they finally parted, foreheads resting together, Wade whispered against her lips. Whatever happens after tonight, know that this was real. Whatever the town says about me, this is real. Clara believed him completely. She had no idea that, less than a week later, the very thing that would test that promise was already riding toward Silver Hollow, a stagecoach robbery that would put Wade's freedom and both their futures in mortal danger. 11. Chapter 5 The Accusation. The Silver Hollow stagecoach ran twice a month, carrying mail, payroll for the mining camp up north, and whatever cash the bank needed moved discreetly. On the morning it was robbed, 3 masked riders stopped it at Miller's Pass, took a strong buck's worth nearly $4,000, and vanished before the 2 guards could get off more than a wild shot each. By sundown, Sheriff Dale Higgins had a suspect. Calhoun was seen riding out toward the pass that same morning, the sheriff announced at the general store, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. Nobody can account for where he was for 2 hours. It was true that Wade had ridden that direction, though only to check on a stray heifer that had wandered from the herd. He had no witness to confirm it, no one who had seen him beyond a distant glimpse from a passing farmer who couldn't say for certain what time it had been. That was enough for Silver Hollow. A drifter with a rumored violent past, seen near the scene, with no solid account of his whereabouts, made an easy answer to a crime the town wanted. Solved quickly. Wade was arrested at the ranch the following morning, dragged from the bunkhouse in front of every hired hand and half the household staff. Clara ran from the house the moment she heard the commotion, arriving just as the sheriff forced Wade's wrists into iron cuffs. "This is wrong," she said, pushing forward. "Wade didn't do this." "Miss Whitfield," the sheriff said, not unkindly but firmly, "step back. This isn't your concern. It is my concern." Her voice cracked, but she did not back down. "I know where he was that morning." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "And where was that?" Clara hesitated only a second, aware of every eye in the yard, aware of what admitting the truth might cost her reputation. Then she squared her shoulders. "He was checking on stray cattle near the north pasture. I saw him ride out by himself." 12. It was not quite the whole truth, since she had not seen him the entire 2 hours, but it was enough to plant real doubt. The sheriff frowned, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to argue with the richest rancher's daughter in front of a crowd. "That'll be for the judge to sort out," he said finally, and led Wade toward the wagon that would carry him to the county jail in Cheyenne Crossing, 40 miles east. As they loaded him in, Wade caught Clara's eye one last time. He said nothing, but the look on his face carried a plain message: "Don't ruin yourself trying to save me." Clara ignored it completely. That evening, her father found her packing a small bag of supplies and coins. "You cannot go to Cheyenne Crossing alone," Thomas Whitfield said, his voice somewhere between anger and fear. "Have you lost your senses, Clara? The whole town already talks. If you chase after that man now, you'll destroy any standing this family has left." "Then let them talk," Clara said, fastening the bag. "Because I'd rather lose this family's standing than lose the one honest man I've ever known to a hanging he doesn't deserve." Her father grabbed her arm gently, more pleading now than commanding. "Clara, think of what you're risking." "I have thought of it, Papa. Every single minute since they took him." She looked her father in the eye, steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You once told me you and Mama built this ranch, believing love and hard work could overcome anything. I am only asking you to believe that too. Just this once, for me." Her father's grip loosened. Something in her words reached the part of him that still remembered the young man who had married a woman with nothing but grit and a dream, against everyone's advice. He stepped back, jaw working, and finally gave a short, reluctant nod. "Take Samuel with you," he said quietly. "I won't have you riding those roads alone." Clara nodded, grateful, and within the hour she was riding east under a darkening sky, determined to prove Wade's innocence before the county could decide his fate without her. 13. 14. Chapter 6. Digging for the Truth. Cheyenne Crossing's jailhouse was a squat brick building at the edge of town, and Clara spent her first afternoon there arguing with a deputy simply to be allowed 5 minutes with the prisoner. When she finally saw Wade through the bars, his face was drawn and tired, but his eyes lit briefly at the sight of her. "You shouldn't have come," he said, though his voice betrayed how glad he was that she had. "I'm not leaving until this is settled," Clara answered. "Now tell me everything you remember about that morning. Every detail, no matter how small." Wade recounted his ride to the north pasture, the stray heifer he'd found tangled in brush near the creek, the time it had taken to free her and drive her back toward the herd. He remembered passing a wagon on the return trail, though he hadn't recognized the driver at the time. "A wagon," Clara repeated. "Can you describe it?" Plain, grey wood, a busted back wheel spoke, the kind that rattles when it turns. The driver had his hat pulled low. I didn't think much of it at the time. Clara committed every detail to memory. Over the following days, while Samuel kept watch near the jail, she visited every livery, farm, and trading post within riding distance of Miller's Pass, asking after a grey wagon with a broken wheel spoke. Most people shook their heads. On the fourth day, an old blacksmith named Hollis remembered repairing exactly such a wheel 2 days before the robbery for a young man who worked, on occasion, for the Silver Hollow Bank. Name was Cody Briggs, Hollis said, wiping grease from his hands. Runs errands for Mr. Grant sometimes. Paid me extra to fix it quickly and quietly. Clara's pulse quickened. Elias Grant's name attached to the wagon seen near the robbery site the same week it occurred was no small coincidence. She thanked the blacksmith and rode back toward Cheyenne Crossing with new purpose, though she knew a blacksmith's memory alone would not be enough to save Wade in a court of law. 15. She needed proof that connected Grant directly to the crime, something concrete enough that even a bribed jury couldn't ignore. That night, staying at a modest boarding house near the jail, Clara wrote a careful letter to her father, asking him quietly to review the bank's recent transactions, particularly anything involving Cody Briggs or unusual withdrawals in the weeks before the robbery. She trusted her father's business sense even while she doubted his judgment about Elias Grant, and she hoped the request alone might begin to open his eyes. She also began to notice something else troubling during her search. Several small ranchers near Miller's Pass complained bitterly of a creek running unusually low that season, despite a wet spring, forcing them to sell cattle early or risk losing the herd to drought. One old rancher, a widow named Agnes Cole, showed Clara a section of the creek bed that had been diverted upstream through a narrow channel cut into the rock, redirecting water away from her land entirely. Somebody did this on purpose, Agnes said, gesturing at the crude channel. And I'd wager good money it benefits whoever's been offering to buy up dried-out land at half its worth. Clara felt the pieces beginning to align into something far larger and darker than a single robbery. If Elias Grant was manipulating water rights to force small ranchers into selling cheap, then framing Wade to remove any obstacle standing between himself and Clara's own inheritance, the robbery was not simply a crime. It was one piece of a much bigger scheme to control the entire valley. She rode back to the jail that evening with a fire in her chest that no amount of exhaustion could dim. Wade needed more than her faith in him. He needed evidence. And Clara intended to find every last piece of it, no matter how long it took or how much it cost her. 16. Chapter 7 The Weight of Truth. 2 weeks passed before Clara's father arrived in Cheyenne Crossing himself, dust-covered from hard riding, a leather folder tucked beneath his arm. He found Clara at the boarding house, and for the first time in months, his expression held no anger, only a grim, tired resolve. I did as you asked, he said, setting the folder on the table between them. I went through every ledger at the bank I could access as a shareholder. Clara, what I found troubles me more than I can say. Inside the folder were copies of transactions showing regular payments to Cody Briggs over the past year, far beyond what simple errand work would justify. There were also records of land purchases, several small ranches near Miller's Pass bought by a holding company that, after careful tracing, led back to accounts controlled by Elias Grant himself. He's been buying up drought-stricken land through a company that hides his name, Thomas said quietly. And 2 days before the robbery, he withdrew a sum nearly equal to what was reported stolen from the strongbox. Clara stared at the papers, her hands trembling with a mixture of vindication and fury. He staged the robbery. He paid Briggs to fake it, kept the money for himself, and let the town believe Wade did it. It would seem so, her father admitted. Though proving it before a judge is another matter. Entirely. Grant has friends on the bench, Clara. Money like this does not answer only to law. It often shapes the law itself. Clara sat back, mind racing. Then we need more than papers. We need someone willing to testify. Cody Briggs, if we can convince him, or frighten him enough to speak. Her father's face darkened further. There is something else you should know before you go. Chasing after Briggs. He hesitated, and Clara felt a chill settle over her before he even spoke. 17. Your mother, he began slowly, and I did not build this ranch entirely from nothing, as I always told you. 20 years ago, this land belonged to a family named Calhoun. Clara's breath caught. Calhoun. I bought it, Clara, at auction, after the previous owner defaulted on a bank loan. I never asked questions about how that family came to lose everything. I was young and desperate for land of my own, and I told myself it wasn't my concern. Her father's voice grew heavy with old shame. It was Elias Grant's father who held that original loan. I have wondered, all these years since, whether that foreclosure was entirely honest. Clara felt the room tilt slightly around her. Wade's family. His father died in a range dispute, he told me. His mother sold what remained of their land for far less than it was worth, to a man who cheated her. Her father nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his tired eyes. If that man was Elias Grant's father, then the debt this family owes has nothing to do with money, Clara. It has to do with a wrong that was never made right, one generation carrying it into the next. Clara closed her eyes, the full shape of the truth settling heavy across her shoulders. Wade had come to Silver Hollow not knowing that the land he worked, the very ranch where he'd fallen in love with her, had once belonged to his own family. And the man trying to destroy him now was the son of the very man who had taken it from him in the first place. We have to tell him, Clara said. He deserves to know. He deserves justice first, her father replied. The truth about the land can wait until he's free to hear it properly. Right now, Clara, we need Cody Briggs, and we need him willing to talk before Grant realizes how close we've gotten. That same night, word reached them that Cody Briggs had suddenly left Silver Hollow, his room at the boarding house abandoned, his belongings gone. Elias Grant, it seemed, was already covering his tracks. Clara felt the ground of their careful plan shift beneath her feet. If Briggs disappeared entirely, the only living witness who could confirm the truth would be gone, and Wade's trial, set to begin 18. Within the week, would proceed with nothing but circumstantial suspicion standing between him and the gallows. 19. Chapter 8. A race against the clock. Clara refused to accept defeat quietly. She spent the following 2 days questioning every stage driver, farmer, and traveler passing through Cheyenne Crossing, searching for any sign of where Cody Briggs might have fled. It was Agnes Cole, the widowed rancher from Miller's Pass, who finally provided the answer. She sent word through a passing neighbor that a man matching Briggs's description had been seen boarding a northbound freight wagon 2 days earlier, headed toward the mining camp, where the stolen payroll had originally been intended. Clara and Samuel rode through the night to catch up, pushing their horses harder than either had ever pushed an animal before. They found Briggs at a rough mining camp saloon, nursing a drink. Alone in the corner, clearly a man running from something rather than toward anything. He startled badly when Clara approached, hand twitching toward a pistol at his hip before he recognized her as no threat. Miss Whitfield, he said warily. You've no business finding me here. I know what you did, Mr. Briggs, Clara said, keeping her voice low and steady despite her racing heart. I know Elias Grant paid you to stage that robbery, and I know an innocent man is Said to hang for it while you drink away your share in some mining camp saloon. Briggsy's face paled. You don't understand what Grant is capable of. He's got the sheriff, half the county judges, more men on his payroll than you know. I understand exactly what he's capable of, Clara said. That's why I need you to help me stop him before he ruins another family the way his father ruined the Calhouns. Something shifted in Briggs's expression at the mention of the Calhoun name, a flicker of old guilt surfacing beneath his fear. I didn't know they'd pin it on Calhoun specifically. Grant just said pick somebody the town wouldn't fight hard to defend. Said a broken stranger with a rough past would do fine. 20. Clara's stomach turned at the casual cruelty in those words, but she kept her focus on the task ahead. Then help me make it right. Testify at the trial. Tell the truth about what Grant paid you to do. Briggs shook his head, fear plain on his face. He'll kill me, or worse, if I testify against him. And if you don't, Clara pressed, an innocent man dies for a crime you committed, and you'll carry that the rest of your life, running from town to town, never able to settle anywhere Grant's reach might find you. Which fear can you live with, Mr. Briggs? Because I don't believe either. Choice lets you sleep easy, but only one of them lets you sleep as an honest man. The saloon fell quiet around them as Briggs stared into his drink, wrestling visibly with a decision that would define the rest of his life. Finally, he set the glass down and looked up at Clara with something like resolve breaking through his fear. I'll need protection, he said quietly. Somewhere Grant's men can't reach me before the trial. My father has friends among the ranchers who owe Grant nothing, Clara said. We can keep you safe until you testify. It was a fragile plan built on urgency and hope rather than certainty, but it was the only chance they had. Clara sent Samuel ahead with a message for her father while she and Briggs began the careful journey back toward Cheyenne Crossing, avoiding main roads, staying at small farms along the way rather than towns where Grant's influence might reach. They arrived 2 days before the trial was set to begin, exhausted, road-weary, but carrying with them the one piece of proof that could finally set Wade free. Clara visited the jail that evening, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope completely. She told Wade everything about Briggs, about the evidence connecting Grant to the crime, and finally, gently, about the land. Wade sat in silence for a long moment after she finished, processing the revelation that the ranch where he had fallen in love with her, the ranch he had worked as nothing more than a hired hand, had once belonged to his own family. 21. All this time, he said quietly, I thought I was just passing through. Turns out I came home. Without even knowing it. Clara reached through the bars and took his hand. Then let's make sure you get to stay, this time, as a free man. 22. Chapter 9. The Trial. The Cheyenne Crossing courthouse filled beyond capacity on the morning of the trial, word having spread through the county that the Whitfield girl had returned with a mysterious witness in tow. Elias Grant sat near the front, composed and confident, having arranged, Clara suspected, for at least 2 members of the jury to owe him considerable favors. The prosecution's case leaned heavily on the sheriff's testimony regarding Wade's unaccounted hours and the town's general suspicion of a stranger with a rough reputation. It was thin, built, more on prejudice than fact, but in a county where reputation often outweighed evidence, it might have been enough. Then Clara's father rose as a witness, presenting the bank ledgers showing Grant's payments to Briggs and his suspicious land purchases through a hidden holding company. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the pattern became clear even to those who had never questioned Grant's wealth before. Elias Grant's lawyer objected repeatedly, calling the evidence circumstantial, insisting a banker's business dealings proved nothing about a robbery 40 miles away. For a moment, doubt crept back into the room, and Clara felt her carefully built case beginning to waver under the weight of Grant's practiced calm. That was when Cody Briggs walked through the courtroom doors. The room erupted into whispers. Grant's composed expression cracked for just a moment, real. Fear flashing behind his eyes before he forced it back down. Briggs took the stand, hands trembling slightly, but his voice held steady as he described exactly how Elias Grant had approached him months earlier, offering payment to stage a robbery and ensure suspicion fell on a stranger the town wouldn't defend. He described receiving the Strongbark's money directly from Grant afterward, along with instructions to disappear until the trial concluded and the matter was settled. Why come forward now? The prosecutor asked, clearly caught off guard by a witness he hadn't prepared to face. 23. Briggs glanced toward Clara before answering. Because an innocent man doesn't deserve to hang for something I did, on account of a man too rich to answer for his own sins. The courtroom fell into stunned silence, broken only by Elias Grant rising abruptly from his seat. This is absurd, he snapped, all pretense of calm gone now. This drifter is clearly being paid to lie, just as he was paid to rob that stagecoach in the first place. Ask him how much the Whitfields offered for this performance. Nobody offered me anything, Mr. Grant, Briggs shot back, anger finally overtaking his fear. Except the chance to stop lying to myself every single night. Judge Harmon called for order as the courtroom broke into chaos, reporters scribbling furiously. Spectators arguing amongst themselves. Grant's lawyer attempted to salvage the moment, but the damage was done. The ledgers, combined with Briggs's direct testimony, painted a picture too complete to dismiss as coincidence. In the recess that followed, while the jury deliberated, Grant approached Clara in the courthouse hallway, his composure entirely gone now, replaced by something colder and more desperate. You've ruined everything, he hissed. Your father's ranch, your family standing, all of it, gone. The moment this verdict comes down against me, you'll have nothing left. We'll have the truth, Clara said, unafraid despite the venom in his voice. That's worth more than every acre you tried to steal. Grant's jaw tightened, and for a moment Clara saw something dangerous flicker behind his eyes. The same ruthlessness that had allowed him to frame an innocent man without hesitation. But with the courthouse full of witnesses, there was nothing left for him to do but wait, along with everyone else, for the jury's decision. 24. Chapter 10. What Love Costs, and What It's Worth. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice rang clear through the packed courtroom. Not guilty. The room erupted, some in celebration, others in shock, and Clara felt tears finally spill freely down her cheeks as the deputy unlocked Wade's cuffs for the last time. He crossed the courtroom in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, right there in front of the entire county, not caring anymore who watched or what they whispered. Elias Grant was arrested before he could leave the courthouse, charged with fraud, conspiracy, and orchestrating the robbery that had nearly cost an innocent man his life. His schemes, involving the diverted creek water and the hidden land purchases, unraveled quickly once investigators began pulling every thread, and within months, the small ranchers he had tried to starve out, including Agnes Cole, saw their water rights restored and their land protected under new county oversight. Silver Hollow took time to reckon with how easily it had been willing to condemn a stranger, based on rumor and prejudice rather than truth. Some folks never fully apologized. Others, like Mrs. Pruitt, found Clara after church one Sunday and, with visible difficulty, admitted she had judged too quickly and was glad to have been wrong. Thomas Whitfield settled the old debt with the bank once new, honest management took over. And he made a quiet, private decision that took Clara entirely by surprise. He deeded a small portion of the ranch, the section along the creek where Wade's mother had once lived and where she was buried beneath an old cottonwood tree, back into the Calhoun name. Some debts, he told Wade, the day he signed the papers, aren't paid with money. They're paid by finally doing right, however late it comes. Wade sent for his sister May that same season, and when she arrived by stagecoach, thin and nervous but bright-eyed, Clara was there beside him to welcome her to a home that finally felt permanent for all of them. 25. Clara and Wade married the following spring, beneath that same old cottonwood tree, in a ceremony far smaller and simpler than the one Elias Grant had once envisioned for himself. Ranch hands and neighbors gathered, the very people who had once doubted Wade Calhoun, now raising their glasses in genuine celebration of a match nobody had understood until they finally saw the truth of it plainly in front of them. Standing at the altar, Clara looked out at the valley she had grown up in, forever changed by everything that had happened, and she thought of her mother's words, written so many years before in a journal she still carried everywhere. A woman who marries for safety alone will spend her whole life guarding a cage she built herself. She had chosen differently. She had chosen a man with nothing but honesty to offer, and in doing so, had found more security and more love than any fortune could have bought her. As Wade slipped a simple silver band onto her finger, he leaned close and whispered words meant only for her. Whatever this town thought they understood about us, they were wrong. This was never about what I had to offer you, Clara. It was always about what we could build honestly, together. And beneath that old cottonwood tree, on land that had finally come home to the family it belonged to, Clara Whitfield, now Clara Calhoun, knew without a single doubt that she had made the only choice that ever truly mattered. 26. Closing narration. Silver Hollow remembers that summer still, the summer a rancher's daughter chose a broke cowboy over every fortune the valley could offer, and proved that character, courage, and honest love will always outlast money built on lies. If this story moved you, if you found yourself rooting for Clara and Wade through every trial they faced, subscribe to see how stories like this one continue to unfold. And please, comment below and let me know where you're watching from tonight. I would love to say hello to you. Just to know how far our story is going, and how many hearts it continues to reach. Thank you for staying until the very end. The end.